Hello and welcome to this QuizCon webinar on the Org Chart app for SharePoint. My name is Peter Baddeley and I'll be leading you through the webinar today. Great, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for attending this webinar on the QuizCon Org Chart. I've just got a few slides to go through just to introduce what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll dive into quite a lot of demonstration today. And as Sarah says, we'll have time for questions at the end, but feel free to submit them in chat during the course of the demonstration and webinar today. So firstly, I just want to mention that the QuizCon org chart is part of a series of SPFX web parts available from QuizCon, which can either be purchased individually, such as the List View Plus and Calendar Plus, or they can be purchased as part of the Data View Plus app, which includes all of the different apps available, including the org chart, which I'm going to demonstrate today. So the org chart for SharePoint, it's all about providing users and an organization with real-time interactive user-friendly organizational charts, connecting to a wide range of data sources and being able to display in a variety of different formats. It's really interactive, it's really user-friendly, as you will see. Users can easily do searches, filter data, access profiles and personas about specific users, individuals which they find within the directory. It's very easy to configure by non-technical users, and I'll actually demonstrate configuring it today. It's now got both a basic and an advanced mode. It's got customizable layouts, and you can change the appearance around as well, and apply things like conditional formatting to apply colors, highlight key personnel, even do things like assistants. We can connect to multiple different data sources. I'm probably going to focus today on the Graph API because that's the most common scenario used, but you can also connect to SharePoint user profiles, SharePoint list data, and Excel. So let's dive straight into the demonstration. So I'm just going to exit PowerPoint here. I'm going to switch over to my web browser. And hopefully you see here I'm in SharePoint, a modern SharePoint page, and I've got my org chart directly in front of me, just showing me two levels of my organization. So I see a couple of people, and nicely I also see these little highlights showing me how many people exist below that person within the organization tree. So I can quickly expand Roy's hierarchy, for example, and see a couple of people below that, and go a little bit further if I want to by looking at Dan here and expanding him in his subordinates as well. So very quickly and easily being able to explore different parts of my organization hierarchy using the org chart app. You'll also notice that I'm displaying different types of users here. So I've got my assistant displayed here, and I'm able to actually find out more details about a specific person by clicking on them. And that will pull up this little card here, pull out key information about them. So I can see telephone number, social connections, and even interact with them on a video call or contact them via email. There's even a link here off to my SharePoint profile, so accessing my SharePoint profile either in this case online or in Office or on premises to actually find out full information about that user. What else can I do? Well, I can search. So there's a range of search and filters available to me. So I can either do a full text search here for a person. So say, for instance, I want to find Andrew. And notice how the organizational chart immediately focuses on Andrew and the people below him. Alternatively, I could search by specific fields of information which I'm storing against that user. So I could search by department or by office location. If I don't know what those options are, I can actually see those different options here. So I can say, actually, I can see the different departments, so I'm interested in finance. And again, it focuses on the finance area of the tree to see that information. Now, during the course of the demo, we'll explore in a little bit more detail how we can do more in terms of presenting the organizational chart and some of the other features available. But what I want to show you straight away is actually how it's configured. So I'm going to edit my page here. And first of all, I'm going to delete what I've done, because I want to show you creating it from scratch and how quick and easy it is to configure the app. Now, I've already deployed the app to my app catalog, so I can go ahead and straight away add it to my page. And there's actually a range of web parts which I've got installed here, including the list aggregator, list view plus, data view plus. But what I'm interested in showing you today is the org chart. So if I click on that, it will tell me, well, which product do I want to configure? It says I'm configuring the org chart, but it might ask me if I want to configure a different one. I'm going to go ahead and say the org chart. And this is an example of the new basic simple mode in terms of configuration of this web part. So very easy to do without all of those additional options which may confuse users. So firstly, I'm going to select what data source type I want to use. So I mentioned the range of data source types when I did the little slide deck at the beginning, and we'll have a little look at SharePoint List if we've got time during the course of this demo. I'm going to start with Graph API and connect to my data stored within Azure Active Directory. Now, don't worry, you don't have to map all of this information. You can, of course, do if you're in very sort of advanced scenarios. QuizCon provides you with some pre-configured samples. So connecting to AD users automatically. And we can see the details of that configuration here. So which columns are selected, filter statements, etc. Which columns are being pulled through. So if you've got custom columns storing information in your Active Directory, you can pull that through as well. And we can also configure the mapping. So I can see here that actually my name's not correctly mapped. So I'll click here and say, well, actually, that's my display name. And we can see all the other fields mapped here. So job title. The org chart app now supports both manager and reports to, because that might be different, and showing that differently within the configuration. And that's it. It is really that simple. So we'll click close here. And you can see my org chart is immediately configured. So a couple of things I want to point out to you. First of all, you'll see this little green tick. So this represents that the cache is up to date. So obviously, if we're pulling through information from things like your Active Directory, there's a performance consideration. So the web part caches some of that data and will refresh it on a regular basis, but the user can automatically refresh that cache. Very useful when you're in a sort of configuration type scenario like we are at the moment. Now, at the moment, this is a fairly basic configuration. I can't come in here and make too many changes because I'm in this simple mode. I can't come and add additional components. If I click here into settings, I've got a few limited options. So I can do things like, let's change my layout. So I want the gray layout, for instance, and that presents it in a slightly different way. Or I want the pencil layout. So there's a number of standard layouts here, but that's actually just presenting me with the most common org chart option here. And there are actually multiple different types of org charts we can use. Now, at the moment, we can't switch between any of those because we're in the basic simple mode configuration, which just gives me, a good starting point. If I want to get a bit more advanced, I can click here and go switch to advanced mode. Immediately, I can start doing a little bit more. So I can change my org chart type. So here I was using this style, but there's a range of styles available. So I can use this one or this one, each of which has their own range of options in terms of configuration. I actually like the default option, so I'm going to switch back to that. Now you can also present the data, and I'll show you that a little bit later, in a tabular list-based format. If you just want to display a list of users, or maybe you just want to do some troubleshooting around whether your information coming through is correct or not. So let's change a few other settings, or show you a few other settings which we can do now. So if I come into here, you see I get quite a lot of different options. So I can decide now how many levels do I want to open by default. Maybe I want 3 levels open, so I can actually see quite a big area of my org chart straight away. I can decide how much space I will be taking up on the page, zoom levels, orientations, the templates which I showed you earlier, and even defining what templates used for assistance as well. So a range of settings. We can also configure some of these other elements. So we can add a filter area. So we've already got it configured to have a full text search, search by department, but we can add other options in here, so other fields which we'd like people to search by. So let's say job title. You'll also notice we've got these little pluses here. So if any of you have used any of the data QuizCom SPFX web parts before, you'll be familiar with this sort of Lego style builder UI where you can add different components to control how data is presented. And this is not unique to the org chart. It's available with List View Plus, List Aggregator, Data View Plus as well. So I'm going to come in here and look at some of my options. So for instance, I could put in maybe some tabs to break things up a little bit if I wanted to. Filters we've already talked about. I can also add conditional formatting. Now this is how we can configure things like assistance. So we can define what are the rules to say someone is an assistant. So I can come in here and say, I'll give this a title first of all, assistant. And I'll say, well, that's the assistant. And then I'll define, well, what's my condition? And there we go. And I could say, well, it's where the job title equals and we'll just apply that and save it. And you can see there now that just Gemma, it's a little bit small on screen, but just Gemma is set as the personal assistant. I can add other styling elements. So say, for instance, I wanted anyone who is a VP highlighted in a specific color. I could do that. So I can come in here and say, well, what color do I want? I want the background color to be red. And then if I come out of here, I could then define a specific condition. Obviously, it's highlighted everyone at the moment, but if I come in here and say job title, let's just go contains, and we'll just for speed put vice. This will then update it and apply that conditional formatting to just those specific people within my organizational chart. So nice ways to control how things are presented in my org chart, however I want that to work. So lots of flexibility about presentation. Now, I've prepared a few other examples just to talk to you about how we can look at data and present data in different ways within the org chart. So let me just switch to a different tab here for a few examples I've pre-prepared. So firstly, styles and presentations. I showed you a little bit using that conditional formatting and some of the different templates, but just to show you that the org chart can be presented in different styles and formats. So this is just a very different style using a specific color I selected and a specific format and layout for that org chart. So those are just options, templates, formatting applied to my org chart. Very easy to do, all done within the browser. I haven't had to write any code to do that. What else could I do? Well, I mentioned that I could present that data just as list table-based form. I can do that as well. So here we see the org chart using one of those other styles which we saw there. So we saw 3 styles for org charts. There was also options for lists and tables. So I can just see that in a list-based form as well. What else can I do? I can have it pre-filtered. So say, for instance, I want a department, a division, just to display their part of the organizational tree. So here I've got a sales page, maybe it's a sales site, and I want to show the structure within the sales team. So you can see here my organizational chart starts at Joe, the Vice President of Sales, and then expands out, showing the hierarchy below Joe. So let's go and have a quick look at how that's configured. If I come here and edit and come into settings. Now, firstly, I've configured my org chart to show 3 levels of data. And next, I've got a filter control. Now, as long as I'm in advanced mode, I can modify this filter. And I've said that I want it to start at Joe, so I've searched for Joe. And then in the settings for that filter control, I've chosen to hide it from users. So users will not see that filter. The filter I've applied in the edit interface is automatically saved for all users. So it's not something which an end user is doing on the fly. If I'm in this edit interface, it's saved for all users. And my org chart will then immediately focus on that person and give me a reflection of a structure within a specific team or department. And I can still add additional controls here. So if I still want people to be able to search within this set of org charts, I can add a second filter control, maybe letting people search by office location or job title, because we know we're in a specific department. So being able to present something in a specific way, have multiple org charts deployed across my SharePoint deployment. Now, I mentioned SharePoint Lists. We've focused up to now on data stored within Active Directory and accessed via the Graph API. We can use other data sources like Excel and a SharePoint list. So I've got a basic SharePoint list configured here with a few key fields of information, name, manager, contact information, and a link to a picture within a document library within my SharePoint site. So basic data, maybe my Active Directory is not up to date, maybe I've just not got, that's not just a very good source of information for me. So I can see this information here. We can then configure a page to display that QuizCom org chart connecting to that SharePoint list data. So let's just switch back and I'll show you the example I've already created. Then I'll go through how that's been configured. So let's load that page up and just have a quick look at it. No, not that one. This one, sorry. So this will look very similar to what we've already seen, but in this case, the data being connected to is my SharePoint list. So here's my organizational chart configured to show me data from my SharePoint list. Just to prove that, let's edit this web part. And if we have a look at it, we can see that it's using the SharePoint list as a data source. So I've selected that there. I've defined where that site exists. So we can, as with all of these QuizCom data controls, connect to data stored within other SharePoint sites. What list am I choosing? In this case, the employees list. Maybe I'm only connecting to a specific view because there might be ones which I might have a flag to say employees which have left the organization and I don't want to include them within my results. And then in here, I can then define where my column mappings are for this org chart. So I can come in and say which fields are mapped for that specific option. Now I think it's not showing me those options because I was in simple mode there. And I would be able to see all of those options to map things like manager and telephone number and email address. So mapping all my relevant fields, because I might not be using obviously named fields within my SharePoint list. Now, before I wrap up my demo, I just wanted to show you one more area, and perhaps the most important area in terms of how SharePoint and Microsoft 365 is evolving, and that's Microsoft Teams. Now, obviously, we could display this web part with it on a SharePoint page inside of a Microsoft team, but actually we can actually use and add the QuizCom org chart as an app directly within inside of Teams. So I can come here, and if I click add, you can actually see that the data view, so this is part of the Data View Plus app, is available for me to use within Microsoft Teams. And if I just click on my tab with that app pre-configured, here's my org chart, largely as we've seen before, with all that same functionality to expand and explore, search for a specific person, and I can also come in and define the settings for my app, very much like I did before. So I'm connecting to the graph, mapping all of my different properties. And if I switch to advanced mode here, I can come in and I've exited my settings there. And if I switch to advanced mode here, I can come in and add things like conditional formatting and configure those additional options like I did before. And that, very simply, is what the org chart is all about. I really like it as a web part. I like the whole data view suite, which QuizCom offers, but I really like the org chart because it solves such a common requirement very, very simply and gives organizations the flexibility to connect to those different data sources which are relevant to them. You know, many organizations will be able to use Active Directory and connect via the graph, but other companies I've worked with maybe have that information not very well managed in Active Directory, and using Excel or a SharePoint list would be the best starting point for them while they maybe mature that data inside of Active Directory. So before we wrap up with questions, let me just summarize a few key points for you. So what is the org chart all about? It enables us to easily connect to a variety of different data sources. It lets us leverage the power of the Graph API, especially to connect to data sources, but we can use things like Excel and lists. It leverages that customizable Lego style UI, which you may have seen with some of the other data components such as List View Plus, List Aggregator, Data View Plus as well, to build up different filters, conditional formatting and presentation of our data. Now this works with Office 365 and it also works on modern pages on SharePoint 2019 on premises. So this is an SPFX web part. As you saw, it can be added to Microsoft Teams, so very important as we evolve into increasingly using Teams for our collaboration. And we can buy the org chart app on its own, or you can buy it as part of that Data View Plus suite of apps, which I think is such a good value suite, considering it gives us not only the org chart, but working with list data and presenting that list data, aggregating data from multiple different data sources, calendar data sources, and other types of data, and some even bespoke presentation of information, which we can do with the DataV Plus app as well. Thank you for watching this QuizCon webinar. If you require further information, please contact us using the details shown on screen.